Good morning, good afternoon, and or good evening, wherever you may be joining us from on this fine day. District Governor, past District Governors, incoming District Governor, Presidents, past Presidents, incoming Presidents, fellow Rotarians, guests, and friends, ladies and gentlemen. I am Selail. I have been with Rotaract for the past 4 years. I have been the President of Rotary Club of Bahrain during the previous Rotary year and currently serve on the board as past President and on the Rotaract District Committee as International Service Liaison Officer. I'm sure you would have already had your welcoming remarks, but I would like to welcome you again and thank you for joining us today in the Rotary District Conference for District 2452. It would have been our absolute pleasure and honor to have hosted you as our guests physically here in our beloved Kingdom of Bahrain. However, these are strange times, and while we may not be gathered physically, we have still managed to stay connected and overcome the challenges in many ways that this current pandemic has presented us with. Let's think about that for a moment. This pandemic that we are living through, just think about how much has changed in the past 2 years. Life as we know it is so much different than how we led our lives just 2 years ago. I believe we can all agree when I say that change is inevitable. It's one of the few things in life that is almost a certainty. On the one hand, history has proven to us, time and time again, that change is certain. On the other hand, in contrast, it has also proven to us that there are some things that are just static in nature. Just think about the avenues of service of Rotary. They do not change every year, maybe not even every decade. Creating strong relationships and fellowship amongst ourselves as part of club service, working with integrity, contributing our skills and expertise to the problems and needs of society as part of vocational service, helping people in our communities and serving the public as part of community service, promoting peace, understanding, and building partnerships in international service, and last but not least, youth service. The topic for this part of our conference, developing and empowering young professionals and the younger generations to come. But what does it mean to develop and empower youth? In my humble opinion, there are certain traits, qualities, that are essential for us to possess as individuals, for us to progress, to develop together, to advance for a brighter future. They are so fundamentally important for us to instill in our youth when we talk about development and empowerment of the younger generations. Some of these attributes are self-esteem and confidence, leadership, discipline and focus, integrity and respect, just to name a few. But many of these things which I have just mentioned are very intangible in nature, unquantifiable. It is extremely difficult to measure, if not impossible. So we ask ourselves, how can we contribute to the young generations from those perspectives? Those are really the things that younger generations can carry within themselves to build a better world of tomorrow. Well, in many ways, we do contribute to their development from these perspectives, whether we know it or not. In our everyday lives, through our interactions with the youth in our environments, in the corporations that we work in our own families, or through the organizations that we are a part of, such as Rotary. Let us take Rotaract as an example, a place where I personally have had first-hand experience and seen myself as well as other young adults transform into a better version of themselves because of those experiences. As many of you know, Rotaract is one of Rotary's many success stories. It was introduced in 1968 as a program to give young adults a place to connect, drive change, and take action for the wider good. Today, there are more than 10,000 Rotaract clubs with over 250,000 members across 184 countries. It is just a great example of how one initiative to bridge the gap between Rotary and the younger generations, young adults, has grown to be so successful. What wonderful growth, one might say, when we look at it from the perspective of numbers. But really, the growth which we see in our youth at individual and personal levels is what makes us proud. I'm sure many of you who are sponsoring Rotary clubs or are mentors to younger generations or leaders within a corporate entity leading young adults see this development and progress firsthand as a result of our active involvement with the younger generations and our youth. Let us dissect and delve a little deeper into why and how we see accelerated development in youth who are part of such organizations and/or programs, and how we can ensure this continuity and progress. Leadership, youth leadership. We have all heard this term over and over again, possibly tens of times at least in the last year alone. It is almost a cliche. Leadership, however, entails responsibility, as in leading a project, leading a team, perhaps, or leading an organization. Leadership is not a skill or attribute which we can teach or dictate in a 2-day course or over a weekend. Rather, it is harnessed through experience. When we place youth in the position of responsibility, and along with that responsibility, we give them the authority and autonomy that is necessary to enhance and develop their leadership. Allow me to illustrate with a story. Napoleon Hill, the author of Think and Grow Rich, a man who spent 20 years interviewing and spending time with some of the most successful people in the world at the time to write a book that states the principles and attributes that are essential and necessary for success. He was sitting in an office of one of his associates who was in the publishing business. As they were sitting, the man's son-in-law, a young adult who was responsible for the supply chain aspect of the business, comes storming into the office and says, "There's a matter of urgency that needs to be discussed. It appeared that one of the suppliers will not be able to meet their required shipment, and they need to act decisively and urgently." The man sitting in his chair took a moment and then presented his son-in-law with 3 different alternatives and explained the benefits and drawbacks of each one of these alternatives and told him that the decision was his to make. The young adult thanked him and left the office. Once he left the office, the man told Napoleon that if his son-in-law makes the wrong decision, it may cost the firm north of $1 million. Napoleon was startled and asked, "Then why didn't you just make the decision for yourself?" The man replied that if this young man is to enhance his leadership skills and possibly lead this entity at some point in the future, he must learn to trust his own judgment and take his own decisions. The moral of the story is that for us to develop leadership attributes in our youth, we must place them in a position of responsibility, providing them guidance and support where necessary, while at the same time give them the authority and autonomy to make their own decisions. Another important aspect of empowering youth is recognizing and celebrating their achievements. I assume that each and every one of us has had interactions with little children growing up, whether they be our own child, our grandchildren, nephews or nieces. Doesn't it come naturally to us that we celebrate every little progress that they make, their very first words, the very first time that they smile and giggle, their first steps? It's something that gives us a lot of joy and happiness. But more importantly, it gives them a sense of accomplishment, a sense of achievement that builds into their character. Every time our youth and our younger generations make progress and achieve something, small or big, we must celebrate those achievements, as that is how we build into their self-esteem, confidence, the drive to achieve more. This conference is just one of the excellent metaphors for celebrating achievements. Every year we get together and look back on our accomplishments for the year, awarding service, excellence, and progress. Lastly, when we wish to instill in our youth those attributes that are so fundamentally important for a better tomorrow, a better world, integrity, ethics, respect, we must do so by our own actions rather than by our words. We must lead by example, for a lot of us in some ways are role models, knowingly or unknowingly, to those younger generations that look up to us, whether as parents, as a business person, or as a president of a club. People tend to do what they see us do, not what we tell them to do. You may have heard the story before. Warren Buffett was asked in a Q&A session at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, what's the best way to make ethical, difficult decisions during tough times? Mr. Buffett replied that it comes down to reputation, and for that, integrity and ethics are essential factors. And integrity and ethics are the factors that also build trust and indicate a high moral standard. As many of you would imagine, managing a company like Berkshire Hathaway is quite a challenge, having more than 300,000 employees across the globe. Warren Buffett has a very simple and smart strategy which he implements. He calls it the newspaper test. He asks his managers to conduct this test. The newspaper test is basically asking people to judge their actions about how they would feel if that action was to be written up the next day in the local newspaper, written by a smart but unfriendly reporter, and read by their family, friends, and peers. And I quote Mr. Buffett here, "It's pretty simple. If it passes the test, then it's okay. Anything that is too close to the lines is just out." We are only human at the end of the day. I know personally I'm guilty of some actions that I would not like to be published in the newspapers. But having that thought process in our minds is what's important for us to exemplify these qualities of integrity, ethics, and morals, so our youth can look up to us from those perspectives as their role models. I conclude my talk with a reminder to us all that if we are to contribute to the development and the empowerment of youth and the upcoming generations, we must place them in a position of responsibility, support and guide them when necessary, but give them their autonomy and authority to make their own decisions. We must continue to celebrate the achievements of our youth when and as they come to fruition, and we must instill in them attributes of integrity, ethics, and morals by exemplifying them in our own actions. Thank you.